It's pretty strange being down here. It's hard to believe it's been 50 years, but it has. Well, this is the old jail, and that's where they had Oswald, and that's the ramp that Jack walked down. And I know he didn't come down here with the intention of, he hadn't planned to kill Oswald. I know he hadn't. He always had a gun with him because he carried a bag of money around with him. And he had his 2 dogs in the car. And if he'd have been planning to kill Oswald, he would not have left those dogs in the car. He would have, taken them somewhere. So I know it was spur of the moment. And he had no idea that they were moving him. So, and of course, the police knew him, and they didn't, they liked him, and he could come and go as he pleased. He was at several of the press conferences inside the jail, and so they just let him walk on down the ramp. And I imagine when they came out and he saw Oswald, he just, pulled his gun and shot him. He thought he was doing the world a favor. And he didn't realize, I know he didn't think about not really knowing what had happened, and trying to find out, which we may never have known, I don't know whether Oswald would have ever told us anything or not, but Jack wasn't thinking that far ahead because he always acted spur of the moment. And I know that's what happened because there's no way he would have left those 2 dogs in that car. No way. That was the county jail. Go in there and get people out at night that got picked up being out after hours drinking.
Tell us about that. How much was it to get out?
$10. They had a night judge, and they'd go out and round up the everybody in these after hours bars, and they'd bring them down here and put them in the courtroom, and the judge would fine them, and it was $10, and they made money. The courtroom would be full of people that they had brought in, drunk and just, otherwise. But they've made so many changes in the last 50 years that, it looks different. Landscape has changed. And of course, I didn't live in Dallas anyway, so, I wasn't down around here that much. But this was never that jumping, except when they brought a, paddy wagon full of drunks in or something, late, wee hours of the morning. Because the clubs closed down at 12 o'clock back then. At 12 o'clock, you could not serve any liquor. And the only people that could serve liquor to start with were private club. If they weren't a private club, you took your own bottle. So you could really get drunk if you were mixing your own, instead of them, whatever they do now when they serve you. But anyway, at 12 o'clock, they shut everything down. And then these after hours bars would open up and people would go there. Vegas Club was open after hours. Well, here we are, where the famous Carousel Club was located. We were right here on this corner. We had a big marquee, and then they had a big glass right there with pictures of the dancers and, the feature and the headliner and all that. And you went up the stairs, and at the head of the stairs was a little box office. And you paid. I forgot what the cover charge was since I never paid. You walked in, we were on the 2nd floor up there. You walked in, the stage was right in front of you, the bar was on this side, and then this was all tables, and there were some booths along the wall over here. Then at the end of the bar, around the ticket taker, there was a hallway that went down where the restrooms were, Jack's office, a couple of other rooms down in there. This building is all new and huge, and I think our little building was like red brick or, like a 2-story building, and it just, it's not anything like it was. I I can't really, I can only visualize, you know, how it was. This is totally foreign to me. This does bring back memories. Well, this is the apartments that Jack and I lived in. He was still living here when he shot Oswald. His apartment was on the left of that opening, and mine was on the right.
And why did you move here?
Because he didn't like where I was living. He came to see me one day during the daytime, and I was living in some little apartments that were cheap and little efficiency, and it was at the pool, and he came out and he was watching, you know, everybody at the pool, and they were all going wee and jumping, you know, and he kept looking and looking, and finally he said, "There's a bunch of queers that live here." And I said, "So?" "Well, you don't need to be living in this kind of a place." I said, "Well, I'm probably safer here than I would be in a regular apartment." So then he decided I needed to move to a safer place, and he had just rented, these were brand new, and he had just rented an apartment here. And so I said, "Well, I can't," I think it was like $200 a month furnished and all bills paid. And I was paying like $150 or something, I don't know. And he said, I said, "I can't afford that." So anyway, a night or two later, he called me in the office and he said, "I have rented you an apartment over there where I'm moving." And he said, "And I'm gonna pay for it, and then you can pay me back out of, you know, your check." And I'm like, "Well, you know, can't afford it. And, well, I'm gonna give you a little extra to, you know," so. Anyway, so I moved in over here with him, brand new apartment, new furniture and everything, you know. It was, so he could keep an eye on me, make sure I was safe. And every morning when the weather was nice, Jack was a real, you know, healthy, you know, he didn't smoke, he didn't drink, you know, and he exercised. And so when the weather was good, he'd get up early and he'd put on a swim cap, which I always thought was funny, but he thought the chlorine, he was losing his hair, and he thought the chlorine would be bad for his hair, so he wore a swim cap like Esther Williams, you know, and he'd come and get out and go and get in the pool and swim laps every morning, back and forth. And I used to stand up there on the balcony watching with my coffee out there swimming. Yeah, these were nice apartments back then. We are at the old 312 Club. Had a lot of fun here. After I dropped off Little Inn, this is where I came to have a couple of drinks and do a little dancing, and not striptease, but just dancing. Listen to the music. When I was young, this is where most of us hung out, my friends and the locals. And we had several clubs. We had another club on the other side over here. I think it was called the Red Slipper. I don't remember where it was. And then a lot of us ate over there at the Mexican Inn. That's been there forever. And we'd go over there and eat. I love to dance, and there was a dance that was really popular back in the 60s called push dance. And, everybody that I knew did it. So we just all went to the same club. There used to be a club called Penguin Club on out Lancaster. Ray Sharp played there, and we hung out there. And so I don't know what young kids do today. I don't think they have near as much fun as we did, but I don't know that. So you drank and smoked, had fun. I don't go any place where I can't smoke. I'm gonna go spend my money and go outside and smoke. Back then, you smoked inside. Everybody smoked, drank, did inside. You didn't have to go outside. The only time they went outside was to smoke pot. And if they got up and went outside, you knew what they were doing. Nowadays, if they get up and go outside, you don't know whether they're smoking pot or whether they're just smoking a cigarette. So this is a Mexican nightclub now. This is a house I bought when I was about 22 or 3 years old. And this is where my mother and grandmother and my 2 kids and I lived. It was just a good neighborhood, a lot of kids. And we lived here till 1969. Yeah, back then women couldn't buy property without their husband, or a husband. And my grandmother kept saying, "But you need to buy a house, buy a house, buy." And so they found this house while I was out of town. And when I got back, my grandmother said, "We've found this house and we need to go, look at it." And I said, "Well, I'll look at it, but I can't buy it." So we came over and looked at it. And it was perfect for us because with those little living quarters, we could, my grandmother could be out there. And so I looked at it, the price on it was $8,400. And I told the guy that was showing it to us, I said, "Well, I probably can't buy it, because of my work. And plus I'm not married and, can't really get anything in my name like that." And he said, "Don't worry about it. It was owned by this lumber company up here on Belknap." And he said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "I can get around that." And he said, "Can you pay $200 down?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, then I'll go on a note with you and it'll be in both of our names. And then when you get it paid off, well, it'll just be in your name." And I said, "Okay, if you can do that, fine." And lo and behold, he did it. We got to move in and it was great. This house has got a lot of memories, good memories, and it was really great. This is where the Skyliner used to be. This is where I started stripping. And it was a huge building. Looks like they've, like a lot of the places that I worked, they made something else out of it. So, parking lots or nothing. And it had a roof that would retract and you could dance under the stars. And it was pretty popular back in the 60s. And on Fridays and Saturdays, Jimmy Levins owned it, and he would have acts out here. I worked out here. I worked with my friend Sherry Lynn a lot. One time I worked with Fats Domino. He was on the show. And then another time, Jimmy Reed, worked with him. He was so high or drunk, or I'm sure he was stoned, and he wore a toupee. And he was stumbling around backstage, and it was time for him to go on, so they put a chair up there on the bandstand, and they set him in the chair. And he was playing his guitar. He was a blues guitar player. And he was playing that guitar, and he started sliding. And he just kept sliding and slid right out off the chair and laid down, and he was still playing, never missed a lick. He just slid right down on the floor. And they had to come back and get him back up, and his toupee was... But anyway, it was interesting. I worked with interesting people, and Fats Domino was wonderful. He was a true, perfect gentleman, and he was really put on a good show. But it started here. And I wish the building was here so you could see it, but it's not. It's kind of sad, but, life goes on and things change, and, there's no point worrying about things you have no control over. So it was, actually, the building was kind of had history behind it, but Someone didn't, think it was worth anything apparently, so they tore it down. We're gonna go to Oswald's grave. My grave spaces are right up there, and he's buried right over here somewhere. Here it is, right here. His mother put a bench up. For some reason, they took it down, I guess because they didn't want people to know where he was.
When you hear the name Oswald, what's the first thing that pops in your head?
That Jack shot Oswald. I don't think Oswald shot Kennedy. I think Jack shot Oswald. And I actually think Jack did what a lot of other people would have done if they'd had the opportunity. That's what I think.
She steps into the spotlight so bright. Her heels click echoes through the night. Feathers and lace in a sultry parade. A dance so timeless it never will fade. She's dancing into history, a swirl of charm and mystery. Every move a memory. She's dancing into history.